Welcome to Sand Table Gamers. I'm your host Frank. In today's do-it-yourself video, I'm going to be showing you how to make modular terrain, and it's going to look something like this. This is going to be a large project. It's going to require a lot of resources. This is a 2x2 foot section of modular terrain. We use it on our 8x4 foot table, so I'm going to have basically 8 of these pieces on a table. When I'm completed, I'll have finished 16 pieces. Some of these will have river sections and some of them will be just flat terrain. So why don't we get started and show you how to do it. Hey, we're back again. In most of the projects we do at Sand Table Gamers, we use some form of styrofoam. In this case, for the terrain I'm using, this is 1 inch thick sheet of styrofoam, insulation styrofoam, that is 8 feet by 4 feet in size. As you can see, it's quite big. You can go to your hardware superstores, and this will cost you about $10, this entire thing. And we're going to create 8 pieces of terrain, modular terrain, with just this entire section. Each of them is going to be 2 feet by 2 feet. We're also going to need a similar size sheet of foam core and a good quality 1/2 inch thick piece of wood that's also 8 by 4 feet. One of the reasons we use the wood is as a base, because if you just use the foam core itself, when you use a water-based glue, it tends to warp. And if you want to avoid that warping, you've got to put a piece of wood that's not going to warp with the water-based glue. So I will show you the rest of the materials we're going to use and resources we're going to use, and we will continue with the project. Okay, here we are. What I'm going to do now is show you all the various materials we're going to be using. There's going to be quite a lot of them. We'll start with that foam I showed you. This has been cut down in a 2x2. The edges are going to be a little rough, so don't worry about that. It's going to make quite a mess, so you might want to cut it when you're outside. Underneath that foam I'm using as a base, this is foam core. It's about a 1/2 inch thick. It's also 2x2. Now at first I tried just using these two components together, with the foam core being the base and the styrofoam being the texture part on top. But if you use water-based glue or water-based paint on the foam board, it's going to warp. So then what I did was, to prevent the warping, this is a 1/2 inch piece of wood. You're going to want to cut this into 2x2 as well. And you're going to want to sand the edges because it will splinter if you don't sand it. So you get a basic sander like this and you sand the edges. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use various kinds of wood glue or Elmer's glue. You can even use hot glue from a hot glue gun, or even crazy glue or super glue, to glue it, and then you'll clamp it in place to let it dry for about an hour, at least about an hour, if not longer, depending on the kind of glue you're using. What else we got here? We've got our paint brushes, our glue, our various white, black paints. I'm also using the burnt umber and the tan colored paints. This will be a saw used for cutting the foam. You'll need either an X-Acto knife or a textile knife or a carpet knife, whatever, something that's sharp and durable to cut whatever you need to cut. Tape measure, markers. This here is basic flock for basing anything. It's like static grass. You'll be using this to cover areas that you want to look like grass. You'll also have a couple cups for mixing glue, mixing paint. These are styrofoam cups. I also use this cat litter because it's got varying size grains and sands in it, and it works really good for creating texture. If you want rough or broken dirt, it's going to look really good. Other things you might need, these are basically popsicle sticks if you wanted to create kind of structures or wooden things, like if you want to do a trench line and you want to line the trench with wood. These will work as like panels, look like 2x4s, that kind of thing. For water effects, this is basically a kind of a gloss liquid. it will create a really interesting water effect, so we'll be using this if we decide to do rivers or even ocean, lakes, whatever you want. This is for water effects. This is an enamel gloss, a clear, over anything that's ground except for grass. You'll use this to protect the paint, protect the material underneath. For the grass itself, you have a spray-on flat clear sealer like this one here. You don't want to use the gloss liquid over a grass because it makes it look like a marsh, unless of course that's what you want. Maybe if you want to make a swamp or a marsh, you would use that over the grass. It really does look disgusting. And this would be your spray over regular grass because it won't make it look disgusting. It'll look pretty good. So these are all the materials we'll be using today to make our modular terrain. And remember, this is just one of 8 that you would have on your board. I'm going to actually finish 16 of these, and it does take quite a bit of time to do each one. Probably about a week, maybe 6-7 work days to do this if you have the time. So let's keep going, and we'll show you what we're going to do next and how we actually put all this together. All right, let's go through the process here. We've got our styrofoam 2x2 piece. We've got our foam core 2x2 piece, and we've got this wood panel in 2x2. Now, if you know a way that you can glue the foam to the foam core without the warping, then you don't really need the wood. If you can't figure it out, which I haven't figured out yet, you really don't need the foam board. You can just glue the foam directly to the wood. But since I've already made a few pieces with all 3 elements here, I want them all to be uniform, the same thickness. So all you do is you use your wood glue. You glue all these pieces together. You use your vice clamps right here. I got 4 of these, up to 2 on each end. I also use a piece of wood to go through here so that I'm not pushing through the foam. When you've got this dried, what you're going to do is you're going to, if you decide you don't want to do a river section or maybe a lake, or you want to do trenches, you've got to measure them out. You've got to cut them into the foam itself and before you glue it down. Then you glue everything down. What I'm going to show you is a piece that's sort of midway through its completion, and it's a river section. Now what I've done with this piece, it's the 2x2. I haven't glued the wood down yet. You'll already notice there's a little bit of warping on the sides, so that'll be fixed by the wood. I've cut out my section for the river itself. I make sure that when I do measure it, the river is always going to be a certain distance from the edge, and it's going to be a certain width throughout. Well, not throughout like this way, but from this end it's going to be about 5 inches wide, this end will be 5 inches wide. So all my other pieces will also line up so we don't have odd angles when you line up all your various pieces. I've got some rocks that are in the water. What I've also done is area that's going to be textured with the texture of the cat litter that you've got here. You'll see it's already been glued in. Everything's been cut, glued. When I use a watered down wood glue or watered down PVC glue, what do you want to call it, I sprinkle or brush on with my brush right here. I brush on a light watered down glue wherever I want to see texture. I sprinkle it on, let the excess fall off, let it dry, put another layer of glue over that to seal it. Then I use a black paint, like we've got over here, a black paint. And I paint all the areas that are going to be essentially rock or dirt, and that's what you've seen in here. The rest of it's a green paint that I've got lying around. And that's just so that underneath, if there's any parts that show through, it's not going to show through white, it'll show through green. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to flock this base, which we talked about, this flock here is in the bag. And it's almost like sawdust that's painted green. It's about what it looks like. And it will look like grass once it's on there. So what I'm going to do here, after this is in this form with the black base coat and the green base coat, I'm going to dry brush onto here. We'll start with the burnt umber and do a heavy dry brush all throughout here, trying to bring out the raised areas of the surface of this board. I'll dry brush once again with a tan color, and that's going to make it progressively lighter and give those shades and crevices. And finally I'll do a dry brush with the white. I'm also going to paint this blue, and I'll show you what that looks like with this next piece. So after I've dry brushed everything and I've actually got blue painted on, this is kind of what it's going to look like. You've got the various layers of dry brushing here, and you can see through where it's black and browns and tans and the white colors. So you have this varying non-uniform mix. Don't worry too much if you do get some blue on the sides. You can always touch that up later. After I get my base blue here, I'm going to then mix some lighter colors of lighter blues and sort of give a swirl to it, look like there's some kind of movement going on here. When that's done and all my painting is complete, I'm going to use this liquid gloss, a clear gloss, and it's going to cover over all the areas that have rock. It's not going to have any flock on it. So all this area will be covered over. These rocks will be painted with this clear gloss. When that's all dry, I then will go into doing the liquid effects. And the way I do the liquid effects is I'll basically pour a little line of this liquid effect liquid here onto the water. You take a small brush and you kind of just dab. You keep dabbing and you're just moving the liquid around so that it's a solid, uniform coverage, but you're creating sort of a rapid kind of effect, like this is all rapids and this water is moving. And you keep doing that all throughout the entire thing in the same direction, and that creates an effect that kind of looks like moving water. And it's a little clear, it's a little thick, so it looks like you can look down just a little bit into it. It gives it a little bit of depth. And it has a nice shine to it so that when the light hits it, it looks like water. When that's complete and that's completely dry, and it'll take a little time for it to completely dry. Once all that's done, I might do another layer of the liquid effect on it to build up that depth that we're looking for. Maybe even a third or fourth layer depending on how deep I want it to look. And we've got plenty of depth here from the riverbanks themselves. When that's completed is when I bring the grass flock out, and I will basically use a watered down glue again and cover all the green area with the watered down glue. And from there, I'll be sprinkling the flock on it. You got to be careful because you're going to use a lot of this flock, and it is a little expensive to buy a small canister for about $20 because you're going to use a lot of those. And you're going to cover it until you get a really good coverage. When that's completely dried, you don't want to put any more glue on it, you don't want to put any liquid on it, you want to keep it dry. So when you want to tap the excess off, of course. When the entire thing is dry, you'll use your spray enamel to spray several coats over all the grass, everywhere you want the spray enamel to go. It's a clear enamel and it's a flat sealer, so it's not going to be glossy or shiny. That's going to lead you to our final piece, which I showed you at the very start. Let me just go get it real quick. And this is that completed piece. So what you got is your riverbanks of dirt rocks inside. You've got the flocked base. When you spray the enamel on, it's actually going to slightly melt some of the areas of the foam, which is good because it creates an uneven ground look, which is exactly what you want, because you don't want all these things to look exactly the same. They look manufactured. You want it to look organic. You'll notice you have thicker areas of grass and thinner areas of grass on the piece itself, and that creates, once again, a non-uniform, more of a natural look. You can see in here where the water effect makes it look like there's moving water in here. There's a good shine, there's a little bit of depth, so it looks like actual moving water. There's even some bubbles in here, which is good because it creates that look of moving water. And some areas you can actually see through to the green base, which is fine because, once again, that's why we painted it green. And this is the kind of piece you're going to get when you're done. And these generally cost quite a bit of money. If you were to purchase an entire set of 8 pieces for a 4x8 table, it'll cost you over $100 to do that. Probably closer to $200, and most of them are custom made. You really can't go to your store and just buy one like this. This is also an example of, it's a little thicker than it normally would be because it does have the foam core and the wood, plus the inch thick foam on top. You don't have to use all 3 of these pieces. You can just go with a 1/2 inch wood, or you can go with an inch thick foam. So this is probably about a 1/2 inch thicker than it needs to be. But since that way I started making them that way, that's the way it's going to be. And that's pretty much how you do it. If you like this, send us an email, look at our videos, and we're also on Facebook, and we can help you out making your own. Thanks for watching.